What is this tree worth? The answer is pretty straightforward when you chop it down. But when it's still standing, it gets complicated. There's a growing movement of scientists, economists, and policymakers trying to figure out the answer, essentially putting nature into a spreadsheet and coming out with a dollar value. They believe it's key to protecting our ecosystems and fighting climate change.
If we don't give value to the forests, we will lose them.
To understand how it works, a good place to start is Gabon, a small nation in Central Africa with some of the best preserved rainforests in the world. It's sometimes described as Africa's last Eden. So we went there. Like many countries, Gabon has earned income from selling its resources, mainly oil. Now, its leaders are trying something different, taking painstaking measures to figure out what its forests are worth, and using them to bolster the economy, without just chopping them all down.
We measure all trees about 10 centimeter diameter at breast height. We tag them, we paint where we measure.
Vincent Mejebe is the coordinator for Gabon's National Resource Inventory. His team has spent the past decade trekking to the most remote parts of the country to measure tens of thousands of trees to track the amount of carbon stored in these forests. Usually, this can be done with satellites, but because of the thick clouds that often cover Gabon's forests, they're doing it manually.
Sometimes we have people injured in the field, and we have to bring them to the hospital. Sometimes we can find a river, and you have to cross that river. Sometimes you have to put your bag on your head, and then, water at this level sometimes to cross. It's really dangerous. You have to love it before you do it.
The end result of all this? Data.
We pull all our data in a folder, then we organize them, and we put them all here.
Lots of it.
So these are from 2020 until now that are here. We have the date, the code of the plot, the name of the nearest village, the tag number.
So far, the team has taken measurements at about 250 locations around the country. By the end of 2024, they hope to double that number. They're randomly scattered across the country to provide a representative sample of Gabon's biomass. They're taking stock of what economists would call Gabon's natural capital, or at least some of it. And it's part of something much bigger. Natural capital is basically economist speak for all the free gifts of nature, from the trees to the soil to the insects it contains. We can consider them capital because they provide services that have value. If they were to disappear, we'd have to find our own way to create oxygen, maintain supplies of fresh water, prevent floods, and pollinate our own plants. That would cost us a lot of money. Money we should recognize nature is saving for us when we keep it intact. And that's without including the less tangible but equally valuable things like the spiritual and mental health benefits of having access to forests. This can feel abstract, but it's actually not. Last year, Gabon became the first African country to receive money for reducing forest-related emissions. Norway will pay the government $150 million over 10 years for reducing deforestation from its 2006 to 2015 baseline. The amount equates to $10 per ton of carbon removed between 2016 and 2025. Ultimately, though, Gabon doesn't have much deforestation to stop, so its leaders hope to get paid for preserving the forests they've already got, which they're now in the process of measuring. But trees are worth much more than the carbon they suck up. To understand the full picture of natural capital, we need to jump back a few decades to when ecologists first thought of putting a price tag on nature.
Some people would rather think of nature as having intrinsic value and that we should protect nature for its own sake. The point is to make it clear that natural capital ecosystem services support human well-being in a significant way.
Dr. Robert Costanza is an ecological economist currently at University College London. In 1997, Costanza and his team rounded up a bunch of early research to estimate the value of all the services provided by the world's ecosystems: the insects that pollinate our crops, the ocean phytoplankton that absorb carbon dioxide, the forests that help regulate our climate. For instance, as of 1997, the world had about 150 million acres of coral reefs, which researchers valued at about $2,500 per acre per year, based on estimates of how much food is produced in coral reefs and the amount people spend on snorkeling and scuba diving there, among other things. Combined, Costanza's team found the world's ecosystems provide about $33 trillion in value, so much that replacing what they do for us with alternatives would be impossible.
Putting it in those terms just sort of made it clear this was a big deal and something that we had been ignoring for a long time.
Costanza's paper sparked an explosion of other research, and decades later, the idea that climate change is costing us significant capital has taken root. Last year, the UN decided to formally adopt an international standard for ecosystem accounting, and nearly 100 countries are using it. International carbon markets are being tested as one option to mobilize money for forest protection, but they've run into lots of challenges, including volatile prices that vary from $10 to $100 per ton of carbon stored. Carbon markets have also been set up to reward people for reducing or reversing deforestation, as opposed to simply paying for preservation work. That doesn't really help Gabon, where there isn't a lot of deforestation to begin with.
The bottom line, even if we get to a point where forest carbon is worth $100 a ton, carbon on its own cannot save the Gabonese and the Congo Basin rainforests.
That's Lee White, a former zoology researcher who now serves as Gabon's Minister of Water, Forests, the Sea, and Environment. He says the carbon market is important, but it severely undervalues Gabon's trees that provide lots of other services the world relies on, and gives few financial incentives to protect those. Gabon's rainforests, for example, are essential for a wide variety of plant-based medicines, such as quinine, used to treat malaria, and rauwolfia, which can lower blood pressure. Even more pivotal, its trees create a moisture-rich environment that supports rainfall and agriculture across Africa, keeping people and their crops and animals watered and fed.
Gabon is 12% of the Congo Basin, the heart and lungs of the African continent. If we lose the Congo Basin forests, we lose the fight against climate change. We'll have hundreds, literally hundreds of millions of climate refugees. We will destabilize the continent of Africa.
Gabon can't simply wait for the world to recognize these trees' full value, and it needs to provide jobs for its people, which means that some of these trees will be cut down. White, though, believes forestry can be done sustainably without reducing the country's carbon stock.
We need to make $10, $15 billion a year from our rainforests to make it worthwhile to the Gabonese people to maintain those forests. If the forests don't create jobs and livelihoods, then it's going to be difficult for politicians to justify to their people that we have to maintain these forests. We work day in, day out to find this balance between exploitation and preservation.